Hello, how's it going, folks? I think I'm about ready to present my findings, as it were, on the first of Bach's, or at least the first that I came across in the Terry book, settings of Herzliebster Jesu. One of which can hopefully this won't be just the dress rehearsal. It'll also be the thing that I actually put up. But so I thought, let's take a look at what we're dealing with here. As I said before, this first, as I said, it's the first of 5 analyses of the 5 different settings, at least that I could find, of Bach's Herzliebster Jesu. And my main point for doing all this is my continuing fascination with the concept of variation, how one creates variations of various types, and which is, I think, a study that is well worth taking in all its many guises. And it's also one that 2 of my heroes, Anton Webern and Arnold Schoenberg, thought was also very, very, very important. Okay, now what we have here, he said, like Cool Hand Luke, is sort of a little schematic graph, diagram, call it what you will, of the basic structure and some pertinent highlights of this particular setting that I think is important. In the red, you have sort of a basic harmonic sketch of where it starts out and how it gets to where it goes and how it gets back to where it started. Then, underneath this black line are sort of a schematics of the full measures. There are 10 full measures in this particular chorale setting. These numbers across the top, I'll talk a little bit more when we start getting into the meat of this. They're basically a rough census of where 7th chords occur in this particular cantata. This also has something to do with sevenths and the idea of sevenths as a dissonance. And then something that I thought was particularly interesting was how the tenor line and how the bass line seem to underscore the idea of heedless wanderings, particularly heedlessness and wanderings, sort of going all over the place in a way, which is something that we already noticed in the first little video that I put up on Wherein I, how chord writing or part writing laws were ignored or dealt with to help underscore voice leading in Wherein I, and this is also true in the various settings of this of Herzliebster Jesu, was hast du verbrochen, particularly this first one, which we'll talk about now. Okay, now what I want to do is, the first thing I want to do is I want to read a couple of verses from the Herzliebster Jesu, was hast du verbrochen, things that I thought were particularly relevant to this to the way he harmonized this. This, by the way, is the Terry 4-part Chorales of J.S. Bach. If you don't have this book, I would recommend getting it. This is just, you spend hours at night looking through this stuff. If you're and unfortunately you get excited and you can't sleep at night. But this is great reading, as far as I'm concerned, in my humble theory composition nerd opinion. Okay, anyway, back to the topic at hand. The first, this hymn, which was the text of which was written by a man named Johann Hermann, consists of 15 4-line stanzas. And as I said, I want to read you the first and the seventh. And I want to give you the flavor of this. All right, the first one reads: Herzliebster Jesu, was hast du verbrochen, dass man ein solch scharf Urteil hat gesprochen? Was ist die Schuld? In was für Misstaten bist du geraten? And that translates as, O dearest Jesus, wherefore hath man spoken against thee, who never God's command hath broken? What is thy crime? How hast thou done transgression? And when made confession? And the seventh verse of this is, O große Liebe, O Lieb und alle Masse, die dich gebracht auf dieser Marterstraße. Ich lebte mit der Welt in Lust und Freuden, und du musst leiden. Which translates, O feeling heart that torture's deeps hath sounded, thou gavest thy life as lest I should be confounded. While we stand heedless, with the world complying, thou hangest dying. So that gives you the flavor of this particular, the affect of this particular chorale, which has to do with the passion and Christ being led off to be crucified for actually literally for nothing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the basic progression, the basic modulatory scheme here. The thing starts in G minor, and then modulates as one would expect to B flat major, its relative major, and then moves eventually back to the G minor. Only the G minor, the tonic it's a major tonic with a Picardy third. Now, as I said before, G minor lasts for quite a while, and then B flat comes in, and it too lasts for quite a while. The first two cadences, or the first cadence is in G minor. The next two are in B flat major, and the last one's in G minor with a Picardy third at the end. But during the B flat major section, there's a nice little, what I heard as a kind of, what I thought of as a kind of tonicization of D minor in around measure 78, which again, in a way, sort of to me at least, in my humble opinion, this sort of helps to suggest the idea of wandering around a bit. Okay, now this, as you might expect, when we're talking about suffering and guilt and heedlessness and wandering, you might expect a setting of such words to have a lot of seventh chords in it. And this line here, basically the number of sevenths, of the seventh chords in the piece and where they exist. There's 1 in measure 1, there's 3 in measure 6, and there's 3 in measure 10, for example. So 1, 2, 3, 6, 8, 10, 13 or so, unless I miss my count. That's always possible, but there's a lot. There are a lot of seventh chords, particularly secondary seventh chords, in this particular piece, and I think they help create the affect of suffering and wandering, and et cetera, et cetera. And I also thought that this was kind of interesting. The very first dissonance, the absolute first dissonance in this piece, right in measure 1, is the dissonance of a seventh, the interval of a seventh, a B flat, and then you proceed here through a bunch. There are seventh chords, lots of seventh chords in here towards the end, up to the end, and then, like I said before, this B flat the B flat is actually resolved as by a B natural in the Picardy third in the exact same voice as in the tenor. So the first dissonant interval is a tenor B flat, and at the end you pick up in a way it's a kind of resolved, if you want to think of it that way. Maybe, well, I don't know whether we actually say that, but it's in that same voice. You have a B flat Picardy third. Now, yes, commonly, Bach chorale settings have a bunch of seventh chords in them. But I think it's interesting to compare the 13 out of 40 beats or so that make up this setting of Herzliebster Jesu. I think it's interesting to compare that with another chorale, which has a chorale setting which has practically no of its 40 or so beats. They're like there's like a beat and a half or so of secondary dominance, and this is another very interesting setting of another chorale called Ach wie flüchtig, ach wie nichtig, which can translate into "Oh how cheating, oh how fleeting." And I want to read a couple of verses from this particular chorale. Ach wie flüchtig, ach wie nichtig ist des Menschenleben, wie Nebel bald entsteht und bald wiederum vergeht, so ist unser Leben säet. And then what was the other one I wanted? Oh yeah, here we go. Let's see, try to find another one. Oh, okay, and that translates as, "Oh how cheating, oh how fleeting is our earthly being. 'Tis a mist in wintry weather, gathered in an hour together, as soon dispersed in ether, and as soon dispersed in ether." Then another one. This is another particularly good one. Ach wie flüchtig, ach wie nichtig sind der Menschen Sachen. Alles, was wir sehen, das muss fallen und vergehen. Wer Gott fürcht, bleibt ewig stehen. And that translates, which is verse 13. This is I guess this is like, doesn't say how many. Oh, and 13 5-line stanzas by Michael Frank, and written in 1652. This last verse is, "Oh how cheating, oh how fleeting, all that's earthly. Everything is fading, flying, man is mortal, earth is dying, Christian, live on heaven relying." So, fleetingness, gone here today, gone the next. That kind, and it's really fascinating to compare this. And I'll put this chorale in the notes as well at the end of this. You can find it. So it's really interesting that in Ach wie flüchtig, ach wie nichtig, the seventh chords are very, very fleeting, but the secondary sevenths are very, very, very fleeting and don't hang around much. Whereas in this one, there's just all kinds of crunchy, dissonant, meandering types of things going on, helped a lot by these this set, or this collection, or this usage of seventh chords, which is a lot more than in Ach wie flüchtig, ach wie nichtig, or Ach wie nichtig, ach wie flüchtig. I can never remember how that goes. Okay, so, all right, so it's really interesting that in the one there's a lot. In the other one there's very few, very fleeting use of this. Okay, so now, pardon me while I get my Miss Othmar yardstick back here again. Wah, 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 wah. And I'll grok on a little bit more about this. Okay, now, something else that I definitely noticed about this was, and what this is the tenor line with high notes, of how the notes proceed from a B flat, then up at a gradual scale up to about measure 5 or 6. You get this, it rises from B flat to F, and then up to a high G, a very high G, type of high G in the tenors, and then it falls immediately back down to a B flat. And then there's another leap where you have this huge B flat to F leap in the tenor line around measure 9 and 10. And then that F resolves down to a B flat. Not a B flat, but the B natural, the B natural in the Picardy third of the final major tonic. And again, this is just my sort of read of this, but I thought that was rather interesting because this fits very nicely with parts of the Apostles' Creed, which I will attempt to remember, about how Christ was born on earth. He died. He descended into hell, and on the third day he rose again, and according to the scriptures. And I think that it's really kind of interesting that you've got two very, very dramatic falls, very dramatic descents here. Here, about measure 6 or 7, and here again about measure 9 or 10, where there's this huge fall to descend. And then and this last leap in the tenor line outlines a tritone. Now, I have no idea whether Bach thought of this or not, but descending into hell, that is the tritone, of course, is the diabolos in musica, as it's come to know. And I think that it's rather that this descent into hell, it just sort of flashed on me that was kind of interesting. But at the same time, on the third day, he rose again, the risen third. The risen third of the G minor tonic chord, I think, is rather interesting. And I have no idea whether that occurred to Bach or not. I don't know whether it does. And maybe it didn't. Maybe it did. I don't know. But for me, from an interpretive point of view, I think that's really quite a stroke of genius on the part of the composer. And if I were preparing a performance of this piece, I would try to encourage my singers to be mindful of that and to build that into their interpretive intellect, shall we say? Okay, so all right, and then the bass line also has some rather interesting things. The choral bass lines in measure 9 or so. We talk about heedless and wandering and meandering and things like that. There are a couple of beats in measure 9 where the choral bass line is above the tenor. It's above the tenor. It falls above the. It is above the tenor, and that sort of reminded me of the sort of heedless of the rules or whatever. But this kind of wandering and heedlessness, I think, is really rather fascinating, and I think that would be something that's worth pointing out again as another, sort of a, I wouldn't say ignoring, but being conscious of the general rules of part writing or the way you usually do stuff, but it's worth a dramatic exception when you're talking about heedlessness and meandering and feckless wandering. To have that kind of thing going on in the bass part, at the same time where the world in its heedless wandering is, and at the same time Christ is hanging, dying, and eventually descending into death, and then rising again. So anyway, that's which I thought this is rather interesting. That if you look at this and you give some thought to that things like this might be of interest to people. And it's a way. It's another way of it's another variation on the theme, shall we say, of how you set a text and how you play with the rules, how you keep the rules, how you break the rules to create what I think is a really quite ingenious little setting of this particular chorale. So anyway, that's kind of what I have in mind for this one. As I said, there are 4 more. I'm hoping by the end of the summer to be at least halfway through the whole set of them. And I hope this is helpful. I hope you found this interesting. I think this kind of stuff is absolutely fascinating. And it's worth thinking about, even if I'm way off in left field. This kind of thing I find to be really quite fascinating and helpful in my own work as a composer, as a singer, and as an interpreter of texts by way of music. Anyway, that's it for now. And I will look forward to seeing you soon. And bye for now.